And we are live. JT here. Welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you. Whether you are tuning in live as we stream into our Facebook community, whether you are watching the replay on YouTube or on Facebook, or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast, thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. My challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation. Remove any potential distractions, and I guarantee you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. Been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. We met in the fall. And I was mentioning to her that one of the things I'm always fascinated by when I meet people is like, what kind of energy are they bringing? And I was mentioning to her before he came on here, as soon as we met at the fall at one of our Football Ontario events, there was an immediate energy that she just brought that just really resonated with me. And I was sort of fascinated by it and really wanted to bring her on so she could share her story. My guest in the huddle today is a safe sport expert, and she's doing some amazing work with multiple organizations. She's doing it currently with Golf Ontario. She's worked with Alpine Canada, and she sits on the board of directors with Football Ontario. My guest in the huddle today is Alexia Tam. How are you today, Alexia?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Definitely. I am just as enthused. So Alexia, before we get started, one of my daily practices is to count my blessings. And as we were talking about before you come on, some days are easier than others, but as anyone that's played sports at a high level knows, it's a daily practice. And I'm a firm believer that one of the biggest blessings that you can give someone is your time and energy. So I just want to thank you again for investing some of your time and energy into being here with me and our community today and being open to sharing your journey. So thank you again.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm happy to share any sort of bits of nuggets of knowledge that I have from my world that, might help people along their journeys.
Okay. So Alexia, one of the first things I like to do in the huddle, and one of the reminders that I often remind myself or remind others, is that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that once said, we all have our quirks. We all have our things that make us different, that make us unique. So I'm curious, is there an interesting fact about you that maybe a lot of people don't know about that you would be open to sharing with our community?
Yeah, it's really random, to be honest. But much of my world revolves around sport on the policy side. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot of this, but on policy education, I coach. So the vast majority of my hours during the day revolve around sport in some kind of way. And so I started just to pick up some skills and some things outside of sport to help give myself a break from the amazing sport world that we live in, but it's fast moving. It never really slows down. And so I hand embroider for fun. And it kind of took off. So now I customize Nike sweaters and things like that. And it's a lot of fun, but I know it's very 80-year-old woman of me, but it's a lot of fun to sit there. And I suppose in that way, it's a form of meditation and a form of paring back and scaling back your day. So one piece could take me anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. So not that I sit there and do it all at once, but it's a nice opportunity to sit there and create some art. And that's a sort of a vast difference from what I do in my day-to-day life. So that's my fun little nugget.
Okay. I love that. I love that you're flexing that creative muscle of yours. And what I also heard from you again is that reminder that as high quality athletes and coaches, we often thrive in the doing, right? Like we have that energy, that enthusiasm to get up and get after it. I think we kind of have this other sort of, law of polarity where it's really about harnessing that energy and that enthusiasm, that passion at times. So it sounds like embroidering does that.
Yeah. And I also think it's really important to, like you hear it in a lot of different ways about people talking about energy, but you can only give as much energy as you have. So I think as important, like we want to fill up the cups of our athletes and our coworkers and our colleagues. But we have to make sure that we have energy reserve for ourselves as well, or enough so that we can fill up the cups of those around us. So finding little things that take you out of, for potentially this group, out of sport for a little bit so you can recharge your batteries, I think is really important.
Great reminder. Yeah. So I'm curious, Alexia, sport has obviously played an important role for you in your life, right? It still does to this day. I'm curious, is there one lesson that you've learned through sport that you still find yourself applying to your life today?
Yeah, sport teaches us many great things. But I think, especially as you pursue competitive pathways through your sport development, it really teaches you how to be malleable. And I think that's really important. As an athlete, I grew up playing soccer, football. You don't know if you're going to show up and it's going to be pouring rain. You don't know if you're going to show up, and you don't know sort of like all of the other elements and features that might pop up that day. And especially as a kid, you still have you're not just an athlete, you're a student, you're all these other things as well. So being able to be flexible and malleable enough to do all of these things in your life. And I think that translates into like careers and adulthood and sort of those other things, as we don't know what's going to come our way when we wake up in the morning. We could have an empty inbox. We could wake up to an inbox of 150 emails that are just going to throw what we had planned for the day completely off. So it's that malleability and that flexibility, I think, that sport has taught me. It's that, ability to be flexible, to react and adjust to what's in front of you and what's coming at you.
I love what you share there because it's so simple, right? And like what I heard from you again, malleability, adaptability, right? That ability to really look uncertainty in the face, right? And go, what's the path forward? So I'm curious.
Sort of that like bend but don't break idea, right? Yeah.
Now I'm curious, was that something you've always understood, or was there a particular situation, event, coach, mentor that really sort of reinforced that lesson to you?
I don't know if it was ever explicitly like a light bulb moment, like, we need to be flexible, but I had a wonderful sport experience growing up. But it was always like, I remember eating my dinner in the car, doing my homework on the drive from one practice to another. And so I think it's just something that you just learned to do. And then as I've gotten older, I'm able to put a word to it. Right. But it's school was always really important, and was sort of expressed by many of our coaches, but my parents as well, to my brother and I, hey, we're happy to drive you around to all these sports that you guys do. But, once grades start to drop, or once these other things start to suffer, then we kind of have to take a look at it and readjust our priorities. So as a kid, we kind of learned really quick that if we wanted to do this thing that made us happy, that we had to be able to adapt and be flexible and do the things that we needed to do in order to continue to pursue sport, but pursue it effectively as well. We weren't just showing up and then going home, right? You go and you put in your effort and you put in your time and all that stuff when you show up to practice. So no aha moment, I would say, but definitely transitioning throughout my stages of my life here, you just kind of realize that you have the ability to be reactive. I'm also a corner. So, defense is all about what's in front of you and responding to that. So maybe, I don't know, that plays a role as well.
Yeah. No, you bring up a lot of great ideas. And what I really heard from you, and I know it came up a few minutes earlier around this idea of like time management, right? Like it really sports, and especially as we move up and we play or coach at a high level, we all have the same 24 hours in the day, right? And I had a great mentor that once said, you can't manage time, you can only manage your activities.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where sports really is such a valuable teaching tool, is because there are clear goals, right? There's a game, there's playoffs, there's a championship. And in order for you to achieve those things, it's a byproduct of taking care of the daily activities, right? And actually, like you said, breaking it down to, one play at a time, that sort of next play mentality.
Yeah. And I think we can inherently teach our athletes about time and time management as we coach as well. So, if you only have one or two coaches, or if you're a coach on your own, saying to your athletes, like, I'm here on my own, this is like my time, I'm coming in so that we can all get better. And my expectation of you is that while we're here, that we're dialed in. So that they are also understanding the importance of, time. Like, you only have an hour and a half, 2 hours together when you're out there on the football field. So it's expressing in a way to them as well, like, I'm going to need some help because I'm the only coach here. So, like, to manage our time effectively, somebody's going to have to step up and lead warm up. Someone's going to have to step up and set up the cones. So it's teaching them about time and time management as well, but also giving them a sense of autonomy and responsibility in that sport environment. And then once we give them more autonomy and responsibility, they're naturally more engaged. So you're not going to have the blank stares and the crickets or the looking over at the other games happening over there, because they now feel a sense of commitment or engagement because you've involved them in different ways. So I think it's good for them to see, like, there's one person out here, they're trying to do a lot. How can we help them? And by giving them roles, they naturally become more engaged as well.
What I heard from you there, it's getting them emotionally involved in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm curious. So, getting to know you again, like I said, you have this great energy about you. You radiate positivity as per our conversation. So I'm curious. You could be doing a lot of things, right? Like you're a natural, you're a leader. You galvanize, like, people will follow you. And before we came on, we talked about, this growth of like football, right? Especially around flags. I'm curious from you, your lived experience. Why is football such a powerful tool? Like in terms of teaching these greater life skills, whether it's like physical literacy, whether it's these greater life lessons, from your experience, like, why is it such a powerful vehicle?
Yeah. I guess that lends a little bit to perhaps my story, just to contextualize it a little bit. I think this happens still very much in the way that the programming is set up, but I didn't actually play in an all-girls team until I was about 14, which is why it's really important for me to, I'm prepping a under 14 team right now for the upcoming provincial tournament. And so these girls are sort of right around my age, where I first got the opportunity to play with other girls. But I think a lot of why football meant and means so much to me is, even before I got to play on an all-girls team, I was lucky enough to have amazing coaches growing up that really outwardly, like, they didn't treat us any different because we were girls or anything like that, which then had like our male peers respect us equally as well. I can say to this day, like, some of those guys are like still my good friends at home and things like that. Because what it also does is it teaches young men and boys about, having women in their setting and in their space as well. But it teaches that resiliency, I suppose, because as a woman or as a young girl in that space, you might not know that feeling until, again, you could put words to it later, but you have a lot to prove. And again, it wasn't until I was about 14 that I got to play on an all-girls team. And so then having that experience, I was never the fastest, the tallest. You can't tell, but I'm like 5'0". Never the tallest, never the fastest, just really enjoyed the game, went there, tried always to work as hard as I could. And football is a game of, it's a game of challenges, I suppose, because again, it's a reactive game. You have to react to the things in front of you. As a running back, I used to be running back for a while, you're trying to find those spaces of open field. They're not going to look the same every single time. You have to have your eyes up. You have to, find those gaps, find that hole. Same defensively. You never know what's going to be coming at you. And I think I just was drawn to that challenge. And something that was really important to me. And I don't come from a football household in the sense where like my dad played or anything like that. We grew up in a hockey, soccer household. But now, like, we're all huge football fans. I make a lot of friends or enemies when I say this, but we're big Fighting Irish fans, Notre Dame fans. But, it was just always part of our lives. And so my brother and I sort of became very football literate, I suppose. So it's a game of football challenges your brain as well. You have to, on the offensive side of the ball, you're learning your plays. You're oftentimes memorizing. I'm trying to get my girls familiar with like a number or a play call and they know what they're doing. But even as a quarterback, you have to be smart. You have to see it. You have to read things. Not everything's going to look the same. So football is a very intellectual game, as it often doesn't come off that way, but it's a very intellectual game. You can't space out. You're going to miss something if you space out. And so I think I was always drawn to that. And yeah, I suppose that's sort of what kept me in it, the competitive nature of it. And then now as an adult, playing with other people that feel the same way about it, still have that competitive aspect to it. It's really easy. We know most girls actually drop out or don't continue with their sport at around like 13 to 17. That's where we lose most girls in sport. So we have a lot of work to do there across sport in Canada, but in that engagement long-term for girls so that they also have a healthy relationship with sport and physical activity in their adulthood. But we lose a lot of people in that age gap. So OWIFA is doing an amazing job of bringing that back into the university setting. So like they're coming out of high school, they can continue to play through university. And then you hit, us kind of old ladies. So it's finding other women that like feel the same sort of passion and competitiveness that has really kept me in the game to this point.
Yeah. I love everything you're sharing. And, a couple of things really jumped out at me. You were talking about, it's interesting for someone maybe that's not very familiar with football, kind of just looks very like it's just two like animals hitting each other. But I love that you provide that great reminder. There's a lot of critical thinking that goes on, at least to play at a high level, right? Like coaches, athletes, both, right? Like there's a lot of critical thinking that needs to go on in order to, because the plays never look the same from play to play. You also mentioned again this it's built in, this inherent, where it really does celebrate, diversity, equity, inclusion, because you have people from all socioeconomic backgrounds. You have people of all different body types, right? You have all different, like there is such this beautiful built-in where everyone is celebrated. And that's like, I feel one of the things that really creates community through football when done the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done across multiple sectors in our world and in our society right now to better celebrate, to better acknowledge, and to better recognize our community. But I think especially there's a huge opportunity within flag and the development of our flag football pathways to actually engage all of the newcomers to our country, to our communities, because flag football doesn't necessarily mean a pathway to tackle football. But flag football is an amazing sport to develop speed, to develop skill, hand-eye coordination, especially with the flag pulling, right? There's lots of elements of almost like, I don't play basketball, but like, like squaring up, boxing someone out, going into at the hips. So there's a lot of transferable skills in flag football. But at the same time, what we're doing is we're teaching kids to be not even football literate yet, but just physically literate, so that they can jump, run, sprint, do whatever they have to do in a safe way. And that we're developing their bodies in a way that, when they get my age, their bones aren't going to creak. And that, so they could go on to other sports, and their success in flag is going to transfer to their success in lacrosse, in hockey. We have a ton of hockey players that play flag football in the summer. It keeps them fast. It keeps them speedy, especially the flag football game, with the cuts and the running and the, hockey players love it. They come, they do their jump cuts, and it keeps them agile. It keeps them, quick and speedy, and still that reactive nature. And so we see a lot of that within our youth programming. So I don't truly believe, we would love to keep kids and push them all the way through our pathways, but at the core, I think flag football is unique in the sense that it has so many transferable skills. They can go on, they could supplement it with their soccer, with their basketball. And it doesn't require the same sort of exertion or energy from the body as a kid, so that you can go to flag football and then go to somewhere else tomorrow or later on that night if you have to manage multiple schedules. And so I think it offers that flexibility.
And, it's interesting. You bring up an interesting point. I love how you talked about how, flag football, you see a lot of crossover with, hockey players coming over. And why I love that is it goes in the face of this idea of early specialization, that you have to be sort of, to be a great hockey player, you have to be on the ice, 365 days of the year, right? And doing that where, as it there brings up a whole host of different challenges, physical, mentally, emotionally, and which I know we can go into. So it's just interesting. It actually keeps people engaged in sport because they're less likely to burn out.
I'm not sure if you and I were speaking of this, or maybe at some point, but there was a really interesting article that came out around why Norway was so successful in both the winter and the summer games. And if you look at their sport model in the actual country, there's no sex segregation at all until they hit about 14. Everybody plays together. You're encouraged to play multiple sports. There's no competitive pathway at 8 years old. There's no rep soccer at 8. Everybody sort of plays house league in everything. If you want to play sport, everybody plays this community level sport. And then naturally what's going to happen is kids are going to find their thing. They're going to find their little spot of success. And what the cream's going to rise to the top in each of those kind of sports, right? And then at which point, I think it's around 13 or 14 that they can start to pursue those more competitive pathways. But at that point, they haven't been playing only soccer, since they were 6 years old. They've been playing a whole bunch of other sports. So then it becomes, again, maybe a bit more of an autonomous choice on their end. And they're saying, I really love this sport. I really enjoy it. The rest were a bunch of fun, but that's my sport. And so then they're also taking ownership and responsibility over their choice a little bit too. But it was really interesting to read about the model in that country and how they sort of avoid that early specialization, the burnout, and how they're not losing kids in that gap between that 13 to 17, especially young women and girls. and that people long-term have a better relationship with sport and physical activity throughout their lives. So I just think it's really interesting where our system across sports in Canada doesn't necessarily allow for that, right?
Yeah.
And then if you want to play competitive sport in multiple sports, then it gets expensive. So then, then in terms of accessibility and access to a lot of these things, it's limited. So then kids have to make potentially a choice at a younger age saying, we can't afford to put you in hockey and in basketball. So you're going to have to pick one.
Yeah. It's interesting. And, as you share that, I just think of, some people would say, oh, well, this is great in theory, but it's actually aligned with Canada's long-term athlete development model, right?
Yeah.
It's keeping them active for life, right?
Yeah.
Where when people transition, I think of myself as I've transitioned out of being a competitive athlete, now it goes into coaching. Now it's like getting out for a run. Like it's just your wants and your desires change, right? Throughout there. So here's a question for you. So you brought up, I love how, you're an expert, in safe sport.
Yes.
And you brought up this idea that really resonated with me early in my teaching coaching career, where I was at also coaching clinic, and they talked about what is the number one reason athletes leave sport? Coaches. What's the number one reason they stay in sport? Coaches. And I remember that 13 years, they said that is really a make or break. Now, this was early in my career, so I'm sure that the research has changed slightly. Why is it so important that we have this greater awareness around safe sport and what it actually means? Because I do believe that some people take it as an attack that what we've been doing isn't like, it's like what we've done in the past is bad. And where I look at it as with greater awareness comes the ability to make different choices. So yeah, I'd be curious. Again, you're the expert in the space.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I always make the joke, everybody, because I'm, the safe sport lady, that I'm the person that you come to when you have a problem. I'm like the person that the scary person, which I feel like is in complete contradiction to my just general personality and whatever. So it makes me laugh all the time. But safe sport is, I know it's a buzzword in the sense, but what it actually is a system of safeguarding. And it's not just there for athletes. It is there for every stakeholder in the system. So it has been really awesome that there has been more awareness around this in the news, and we're seeing more stories pop up. The closer to home it feels, unfortunately, the more engaged people are with the subject matter. But I agree with you. It also sort of ignites this feeling of fear in our communities. And that is the exact opposite of the intention of safe sport. Safe sport is not there to call people out, to make people feel like it's an attack on them and their practices and this and that. But really, it's a philosophy and a framework that it's the responsibility of each and every single one of us in the sport environment. So coaches, parents, athletes, officials, volunteers, whoever it might be, that we have a responsibility to report and recognize the acts and behaviors that lead to the opposite of a safe, healthy, inclusive environment. Ultimately, the goal of safe sport, if we do everything right, I shouldn't have a job. I think that's it's a terrible way to say it, but if we really, through all of our actions and behaviors, really succeed in creating safe, healthy, and inclusive sport environments, that safe sport should really be at the back of our minds. Where I am really happy that it's at the front of people's minds right now, because as a country, we're learning a lot, and we're learning a lot together right now. We're on this growth and knowledge journey together with safe sport, similar to how we were with concussion a couple of years ago. So the example I always give to parents or coaches when I'm giving seminars is, if you can make a commitment to grow, if you could have an openness, I suppose, to grow and learn with safe sport as we did with concussion, we'll be in a really good place. Because we didn't know a bunch about concussion a couple of years ago, just like we don't know a ton, or we're learning more about safe sport now, right? So in 5 years with Safe Sport, we'll be where we're at with concussion now. We're like, we know the protocols, we have returned to play. We're updating our technology every year. There's new helmets, there's new gear, there's all of this stuff that's protecting athletes from concussion. So all I say is if we can commit to having the openness to learn with Safe Sport as we did with concussion, because concussion was a really scary thing for us as well at one point. We were all very scared of it. We were frightened if, our athletes are in this setting, they get knocked in the head. Our first thought is always, okay, go get concussion testing, do all this stuff, like all of that. If we can have the same sort of attitude towards Safe Sport, take the fear out of it and saying, I'm learning and I'm growing. And it's not to say that what I was doing before was necessarily bad, but just like, again, concussion, the more we learn, the more we can adjust our actions and behaviors. And some actions, they're not necessarily bad, but they're not acceptable in the way that we interact with youth and with minors. I don't want to say anymore because they were never acceptable, but sport has this inherent normalization in it where we often coach how we were coached. And, we just sort of replicate these patterns of behavior. Again, it's not saying it's necessarily wrong, but if we can be open enough to learn and to change our behaviors, then we'll be in a really good place. And so my job, my day-to-day job, and like sort of what I hope to bring to the communities that I work with is strategies to, it's one thing to say, don't yell at kids anymore, like don't do this or don't do whatever, but then you leave your community with, okay, you took a bunch of things away, but you didn't give me any strategies to replace those. So a big part of my job is taking the fear out of it and saying, try this. Here's a way to, engage your athletes in the same kind of way. Safe Sport doesn't mean that we can't discipline. It doesn't mean that we can't, have expectations for our athletes and things like that, but it's doing it in a way that they are safe, that we are also safe. Because again, Safe Sport is not just for athletes against coaches, but it's for us to be safe, for our parents to trust that they're sending their kids into a safe space. But it's like coaches take a lot from parents sometimes too. So it's making sure that those interactions are safe for both parties as well. We know that officials, and that's coming up more and more and more, officials, we want them to feel safe. That's their work environment. They're coming to work. So we want them to feel safe. So Safe Sport is really, the idea behind it is making it a welcoming workspace for all of the stakeholders that are engaging in that. So I think it's, if we are switching that mindset, because I know I hear it all the time, coaches are like, I'm walking on eggshells. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do that. And so it's being open enough to share your experiences. And then as a collective, try out some of these other strategies, because research has shown that they are just as effective as some of the strategies we have used in the past that, would fall under what is now the UCCMS, which is the Universal Code of Conduct to Address and Prevent Maltreatment in Sport. It's a mouthful. But that comes from Sport Canada. So that's sort of our best practice policy on what is and what constitutes maltreatment. So a lot of the behaviors that we used in the past might fall into that category in one way or another. And so it's just saying, okay, we've recognized that. How can we move forward that still produces the same, if not better results? And that's why I've been saying along the way, this autonomy, this responsibility, this choice. I don't think kids are ever too young to have a sense of engagement and have a sense of choice in decisions that affect their lives, and sport affects their lives. And so whether that's at school, in the classroom, at home with their parents, or when I get them in sport, even the young guys, the young little ones, guys and girls, I always say, would you like to do this or would you like to do this today? And so it's very small, but they have a sense of engagement. They get to make a choice. It's not saying that all bets are off and coaches can just leave and they can do whatever they want. It's giving your athletes choice within reason to actively participate and engage with what they're doing. I know I'm speaking a lot, but I have an activity that I do with my with that I've done with my girls. They all got a piece of paper at our first practice. And I said, I want to learn 3 things that you personally want to achieve or get better at in this season. And then give me up to 3 things that you wish for us as a team. And so with that, I got to learn a lot about them and what they want to do. And it also sort of helped us create our team philosophy. And I can tell you, you would expect from like younger kids that the first response is always going to be, I want to win. Mm-hmm. It showed up, but it wasn't the first one on the piece of paper. The first ones were, I really want us to work together as a team. I want us to like get better at teamwork. I want us to have fun. And then came like, I want to win. And those are the team goals. And then the personal goals ranged from sport specific skills. Like I want to get better at rushing. I want to get faster. But I want to work on my sportsmanship. I would like to play without getting injured. So like, perfect, like getting better at a warm up so that, you can play safely. It really ranged. And I think now I can see that and take that as a coach and implement that into my practice schedule or whatever it is. But I learned a lot about them. And I also gave them the chance to tell me how they wanted to improve. So now I can actually go and do that. I know I've been on a ramble, but that was sort of an activity that I really like to use to get them engaged.
I can definitely get a sense of why you're such an effective coach and leader, Alexia. A couple of things really stood out to me was, one, I love how you build in the power of choice, right? And that's really, through the nature of the coaching consulting work I do around like free will. Like what is free will, right? Like we've been led to believe free will is the ability to act, where peel it back another layer. Free will is really the ability to choose your next thought. And I love how you build in opportunities for athletes and people you lead to choose their next thought, whether it's their goal, or what they want to do next. It also reminded me of a powerful story that near the end of my teaching career, as I started to dive into personal growth and self-development, I started to find ways like I want to engage them in this learning process, like this standing at the front of the room, pontificating at them, telling them this is like, did not sit well with me anymore. So I remember starting to work with students and starting to be, okay, well, your mark, we're in school, so you do need to have a mark, but let's build a rubric together. And I remember giving them like, okay, here are some examples. What would a level 4 look like? So for anyone that's not teaching, this would be like, what would an 80% plus assignment look like? What would 70 to 80 look like? And I remember just going with them. And like you said, when I gave them the choice, engage them in the process, what I found is the marks naturally took care of themselves. And again, that kept them engaged in the process. So that sort of led me to want to ask you this question. I firmly believe that we've been led to fear change, right? Like we've been conditioned to believe that safety and comfort's where it's at, like stay the same, status quo. What would you say to maybe a coach that says, okay, like this safe sport, I get it. Like this sounds all great, but what is the benefit to me as a coach? Like, is it really going to lead to more like wins? Like that's kind of, I feel sometimes a resistance we face. Like, this is great, this sounds good in theory. Where does it actually benefit, me, the team, the athletes?
Yeah. My initial gut emotional reaction. Well, if you don't want to end up on the news, it's probably like this to adopt. But aside from that, like I'm not making a joke out of that because it's very serious and the people that it happens to. But if I'm responding emotionally, that's sort of my it's a risk management tool as well, right? It protects you as much as it protects the athletes. So that's just generally some good knowledge to have. But on the coaching and engagement side of things, this idea of choice and autonomy, I don't actually see as being different from some of the strategies we use for safe sport, because once you start engaging them in autonomy and choice and, giving them responsibility, what it naturally does is it opens up the lines of communication between coach and athlete. And so that if things pop up that are, let's say they've had a negative experience, they've experienced abuse, they've experienced harassment from another coach, from another athlete, from a parent, whatever it is, you've now created this channel because you've been giving them choice. You've been giving them options along the way where that they now can make the choice to come and speak to you as a trusted adult. And so my area of research, it's safe sport in general, but what I'm doing my doctorate is in peer-based relationships in sport. And I study power. So a lot of what you were saying about free will and stuff comes up in the study of power and what does it mean to have power, who has power. And I think that we have gotten stuck in this idea that power is something that can be owned. Power is a commodity that, like, if I have it, that means you don't have it. And my understanding of it, and again, there's many different theories, but sort of the way that I understand power is that power is constantly negotiated and renegotiated. And if you speak, so many of the people, so I do qualitative research, so I just sit down and I chat with people. Most of the people that I chat with will say everybody has some sort of power. And so and then it's the ways that you utilize that power, or that then, create these power hierarchies and things like that. So my master's work looked at intercollegiate athletes. So naturally there's power structures there. Some sports have more power than perceived power than others, but everybody said, and I think this is really important, that I didn't speak to a single person that said, I have no power. Not a single person. So I think that as we move through our coaching careers or our teaching careers or whatever it is, it's understanding that, yes, I have a degree of power. And in this setting, I might have quote unquote more power than you. But it doesn't mean that those that we are teaching or interacting with have none. And so I think that by giving them responsibility, choice, these kind of things, what it does is it sort of renegotiates this power structure. And it's not saying, again, as coaches, there's no point of us being there, just walk away, they can take care of themselves. But what it does is it creates a better and a stronger bond and channel for communication, channel for respect. I'm telling you, start to give these kids some choice. They're going to show up on time with their cleats at 6 o'clock, ready to run, not getting there at 6:05, still needing to gear up. Because they have an active role in this process. They're like, I have just as much skin in the game as Coach Lex. I need to be there on time. Then they'll get on their parents because, at a certain age, they can't drive yet. They'll be like, Mom, I gotta be at football at this time. I can't be late. And so safe sport is not separate from a lot of these things. And that's why I was saying there's a component of case and risk management to it, to what do we do when we receive a complaint? How do we create environments where people experience they don't have, like, the opportunity to experience abuse isn't there. That's part of it. But ultimately, it's how are we creating these spaces where people are leaving and they're saying, I had a ton of fun today. And then, they're taking those skills that they don't even know that they're learning and they're bringing it into when they go to school the next day, or when they go to their basketball practice tomorrow or whatever it is. And so I think that us as coaches, as teachers, as whoever we might be in these authoritative roles, it's opening ourselves up to remember that we can learn as much from them as they can learn from us. They're like, even if you just take a basic like technology, like I'm fairly young still, I'm pretty in it with technology, but I hear things from them all the time. And I'm just like, I don't even know what that is. And I think there's, again, a lot of things that we can learn, or maybe that we forgot as adults now, that we can relearn about friendship, about compassion, about all of these different things that we kind of forget sometimes in our corporate potentially worlds, or like just like the busy adult worlds that we live in, that kids are just so, it's so pure to them still. So opening ourselves up to say, yes, I'm teaching them a playbook. They are learning from me. They're learning these skills, but also realizing that you're learning from them. And again, that will help to, again, I think when we say the word equal, it's saying that it's a commodity to be owned, but really it's just bringing the stakeholder groups closer together so that you can have a better form, better line of communication. And then naturally it's going to trickle into our goals for safe sport. It's a natural thing.
I love everything you're sharing, because it's interesting, because I feel like, we start to look at safe sport. It was interesting. I even sort of challenged me to think about what is when I say the word safe sport, what do I think?
Yeah.
It was interesting how you've reframed it as it's a way to empower people to make choices about where they're headed. And it's so interesting because, I even think of this situation this week with my daughter. She wanted to go out. We decided to have some daddy-daughter time, and we went out and shopped for my wife for Mother's Day. And shopping, and if I'm going shopping, it's not to walk around the stores. It's like, I'm going to get exactly what I want. That's it. And I took her there. I took my daughter there. And I just said, what do you want to get? And it was interesting because part of the process was just get what you want. Like, let's celebrate. It's about celebrating Mom's Day. And she was just getting choices. And then we picked some. And then you could see she was looking for me to answer, like what to tell her what. I'm like, get whatever you want, sweetie. And it was interesting. And when we got home, the best part of her experience was that, and I asked her what the best experience was. You just allowed me to choose. And that's all it was, right? Like, yeah, the byproduct was getting my wife Mother's Day, but really being able to empower my daughter with this idea of you have the freedom to choose, is like, to me, the gift that I think will set her up to succeed.
Yeah. And I think as coaches, sometimes you're like, I can't give them endless I can't give them endless choice. We're never going to like get anywhere. It's going to take us the whole practice just to make a choice. So something we can always do is, okay, I choose 3 options. You as a team choose 2, and then I choose 1, or whatever that, like, however many options you have, 5, you work your way down. They have to but then it like forces them to teamwork as well. Okay. In your collective, figure out what your 2 options are. And then I'm going to make the final choice, whatever it is. So there's ways, and there's different strategies to build in choice and engagement. And there's this whole framework on person-centered learning. So a couple of years ago, it's like sort of just sitting in all of our back pockets right now. But Dr. Ashley Sterling and I from the University of Toronto worked with the varsity programs and collegiate athletes of the University of Toronto. And it's kind of on pause, but we were in the process of developing sort of a framework or an idea around, we combined all the person-centered frameworks that were sort of out there. So athlete-centered coaching, it's a big one, person-centered learning, child-centered care, and then patient-centered care in like hospital and healthcare settings. So these 4 major person-centered frameworks. And we found obviously similar tenets throughout them all. And so then what we did there is it's really transferable to anything in any stakeholder group that you're working with. But at the time we were working with varsity athletes and their engagement with their own learning and their own like schoolwork. And we sort of came up with this framework, but ultimately it starts at this empowerment piece. So empowerment is the first one. And then there was a bunch of like subcomponents and what actually fosters empowerment. So empowerment led to self-direction. So under self-direction, then you're self-motivated, you're self-regulated, you're all of these other things. And then the final one was this idea of sharing. And so ultimately, if we can get people through that, it also works as a positive feedback loop, right? If we can get people to this point of sharing and sharing their knowledge to the point where they can go and, teach others or explain things to others, one, it fosters more learning for them because they have to break down, let's say in football, they have to break down that skill small enough to teach someone else that they really have to understand it in order to break it down. So if we get it to that point where we give our learners the opportunity to be coaches and mentors, it fosters more learning for them. Plus they've now, shared their learning with someone else who, can go through this loop. And then what it does is it fosters more empowerment, more self-direction, more sharing. So it is truly this positive feedback loop for learning. And what we tried to do was combine these four major person-centered frameworks into something transferable for some of these stakeholder groups that we were working with. But it works for safe sport. It works for, DEI initiatives. It works for just plain old regular, I got to be out there on a Friday night lights coaching kind of thing. In the ways that we scaffold, I know that's a very teacher idea. And, how do we scaffold learning? How do we build in learning in different ways?
Yeah. Oh, so many good things. Alexia, I feel like you and I could talk for hours. I feel like we're talking about teaching, we're talking about learning, we're talking about behavior, human psychology,
I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to those things. I feel like it comes with the academic nature. Not many people get excited or spend the last 10 years studying violence and power.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then they're not separate. A lot of these things and so that's why I would say that I'm mostly a social scientist or a sociologist, but when you're looking at sociology, you can't help but look at psychology and human behavior. And some of these other things, you have to look at some of these other theories. And some of them really interest me. And as you can see, the wheels just turn and I come up with a bunch of random things. But yeah, I try to bring what I learn into just to bring it back, I suppose. I'm so proud of the girls that I'm working with right now. See a little bit of myself in there and where I was, but also the growth in our province, or the commitment to growing the women's game in that pathway. I know there's the championship happening right now in Ottawa, and honestly, a big shout out to Olivia, who has been just really on top of it and pushing OWIFA and pushing that pathway forward. Because when I played, OWIFA wasn't a thing. We were just a bunch of university kids who would schedule our own tournaments, and it wasn't regulated in any kind of way. So she's made huge strides there. What they're doing in the women's contact program, or even women's flag and touch, sort of all the way up. It's really impressive to see. And all I hope is that I can empower my girls and my team, that once they leave me and they move on, that they continue this positive relationship with, doesn't even have to be football, but just with sport and with physical activity. And as long as they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And the one thing I've really gotten from you as we've been chatting here is you are so focused on helping and serving, right? Of really empowering the next generation to really become all they were meant to be, as cliche as that is, right? It's amazing just to see your passion for it.
Thank you. And winning is fantastic. I'm a competitive person myself. I don't enjoy losing. I don't lose well. I try to keep that inner demon in when I'm around the youth, because you don't want that to come out. But kids are so resilient. They are, they'll lose a game, they'll be a little bit upset with themselves. But if we can I guess radiate positivity, just to keep with the trend, if we can get them excited about the next thing, they're going to forget about that game and they're going to move on, and they're going to bounce back bigger, better, stronger, faster, braver, whatever it is. And again, more empowered and more engaged to next time I'm going to square up for those flags. Next time I'm going to make sure I catch before I run. That I still do that to this day. I'm always taking off before I've even secured the ball. But, things like that. I think that as coaches, if we can say, you know what, we tried our best out there, we did really good. Again, sandwich method, that stuff, like say what we did really good, say things we need to work on, and then close it off with stuff that we did really well. The kids are going to bounce back, and they're going to hopefully come back next week more excited, more ready to play. I think that's all we can really do as coaches. As much as it sucks to lose, and sometimes we lose big games that we had to win or whatever it is, but that's part of sport.
Mhm.
And it's teaching us as coaches and teaching them lessons that they're going to carry on to when they go to high school, when they go to university, when they do post-grad or whatever it is. Not everybody's going to sign up for years of school like me, but once they join the workforce, sport provides them with these things that if we can teach them now that's a skill too, I guess, how to lose well.
Yeah.
How to win well. I think that's a thing too, right? Like not winning and gloating and whatever, but how to win humbly, how to win gracefully. And, it's going to hopefully transfer into other aspects of their lives so that they go on and one day you'll have them on your podcast and not me.
Yeah. Well, Alexia, I want to take a moment to thank you and really acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for the woman you are, the great daughter, sister, teacher, coach, mentor, shining light, but more importantly, the amazing human being you are. The one thing I've definitely come to appreciate about you is you really do radiate positivity, right? Like you truly do want to make this world a better place. You want to make this world a more empowered, a more empowered world where people feel like they have choice. So I just want to thank you for again, just choosing to radiate positivity. It's inspiring to me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy that you brought me on. I know I ramble sometimes, but really happy to be here. And like I said, when I started, I hope that those that have tuned in are going to watch later are able to take away some nuggets. I suppose safe sport is especially that it's not something that we can just like absorb and understand in one day. Even I've been in it for almost 10 years and I'm still learning about it. But if it's piqued our interest or it's made us curious, I think curiosity is something fantastic in humans as well. If it's made us curious about something that pushes us to learn a little bit more, then I've done my job. And I'm happy to support people's knowledge journey along on this pathway as well. So
definitely. So folks, Alexia shared so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that not only apply to sport, but more importantly, the game of life. And as I remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's the consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually creates great results. So my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. Now go live it. And as always, I love having these conversations. If there is something in here that resonated with you, my ask is that you share this conversation, because the more people that we have understanding these ideas, getting around these simple ideas, the more people we have radiating positivity, the brighter this world's going to be. Have a blessed rest of your day, and I'll chat with you next week in the huddle. Have a great day, everyone.